everyone, and welcome back to the Leading in a Crisis podcast. So happy to have you with us again today. I'm Tom Mueller. Hey, on the podcast today, we're going to take a deep dive into the world of AI once again. In the past, we've talked about a number of AI tools that are out there that help make life easier for corporate communications folks or organizations with smaller teams. Well, on today's episode, there's a brand new AI communications and response. Well, it's a response and planning tool that's been developed by a company called ClearLine Crisis, and the principal there is Mitch Cohen. Mitch, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Tom. It's a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this.
Mitch, take just a minute and give our listeners a quick thumbnail of your background and career path.
Sure thing. I've been in crisis communications for over 25 years now. I have been on every side that you can imagine: startups, in-house, agency, massive corporations, mid-sized organizations, all around the field. Most of my background has been in heavily regulated industries, financial services and housing and data and healthcare. And one thing I've noticed in my career over this entire quarter century has been that no matter the organization, whether they're a small startup or a massive corporation, when crisis hits, in a certain sense, everyone is always starting from zero. Even if there is a crisis communications plan, chances are it's on a shared drive somewhere. It was last opened by someone maybe 6 months, a year ago. The spokesperson may or may not still work at the organization. The regulatory stance may or may not be accurate. And the plan isn't so much a plan as it's a document. So I've seen this happen. I've been on the receiving end of that 11:30 Sunday night call where suddenly we have to address a reputational crisis. But the preparedness piece has never been there. And I think the reason for that is because most comms teams, unless you have a dedicated crisis communications function, which many companies are not fortunate to have.
No, very unusual.
The comms team generally has been built for visibility, right? To increase visibility, to increase credibility and authority. And it's I don't want to say an offshoot of marketing, but a kissing cousin of marketing. And and that's what the team is designed for, not to save the company in the worst week of its existence. So seeing this over and over and over again led me to think that there had to be a better way.
Okay, well, we're spending more and more time talking about AI tools out there because they're really, the intention is, as I understand it, is to take on some of those mundane tasks that would then free up staff for more value added, planning type functions or customer facing functions. So AI is intended to help, sort of relieve some of the workload and automate things in the background. But now when you apply it to a crisis tool, what, tell us what your thought process was going into that, Mitch, in terms of, hey, I've got all this crisis experience. Now I want to go, beat my head against the wall and learn AI tools. And that's a deep dive in itself. But so why did you decide to do that?
Why is an entirely different question, Tom, and I don't know that I could answer that one. But what I am fortunate enough that I'm a relative old timer when it comes to AI, particularly from a comms perspective. I ran public relations for a company called Black Knight, which was a mortgage technology and data provider at one of the largest players in the field. Back in 2018, Black Knight acquired in a fit of of 7 acquisitions in 2.5 years, acquired a company called Heavywater, and Heavywater was an AI machine learning firm. And this was back in 2018, which at the rate of the technology improving is the relative dark ages. But it gave me a real strong foundation in what the technology could actually do as compared to what people assumed it could do or worried it could do.
Mhm.
When it comes to crisis communications, the last thing in the world you want is that generic AI nonsense, well researched, but not of any value, not supported by any sort of experiential understanding. You get what feels like a confident response. Hey, chat, work me up a crisis communications plan. We're having a problem here. And
Mhm.
you'll get stuff that'll come back and it'll sound extremely confident and will, maybe even look the part, but it's not. And it's not the sort of file that I would want to have in my crisis response. But I did start working with AI as a user shortly thereafter, and I grew up with the LLMs. The last 18 months or so before I launched ClearLine, before I began the building of the platform in earnest, were spent eliminating that AI voice and that AI uh, false certainty. And what I did there was I built 2 separate layers for every prompt to go through. And this was for my use in my consultancy originally. And each of these 2 layers serves a distinct purpose. The first is what we call the ClearLine doctrine, and it's a crisis communications philosophy. And what a good holding statement should contain, what a stakeholder sequencing should look like. Don't attack your accusers. There's an entire philosophy baked in, and it's a very, very comprehensive and complex series of instructions that then inform or began to inform every interaction I had with the AI.
Okay, so you're basically taking your accumulated knowledge over your career, putting that into a series of rules and guidance that form sort of the basic operating structure for the AI to use.
Exactly. But it can't stop there because we need it to sound not like ChatGPT's in the room, but like there's a senior crisis communications advisor in the room. So there's another layer. And I have an MFA in fiction writing from the Iowa Writers Workshop, right? So I take language exceedingly seriously, right? And I mean, word choice, commas, everything
Mhm.
means a lot to me. And AI slop, it personally offends me. And the fact of the matter is, and I don't want to cast any stones, but if you go on LinkedIn these days and you read 10, 15, 20 posts, they all sound exactly the same now because they're all being pumped through one of the major LLMs, and they're coming out and they sound interesting
They
and
do.
bland.
They're generally pretty good stuff. I've
Yes,
been amazed, but
but the
it's
language.
generic.
Yes. So the second layer is language, and that took a lot, and it's something that I'm constantly honing. But like I said, 18 months spent building these layers that would wrap. When they became functional enough that I would use them myself, I started thinking, well, I know many of my peers I mean, I would have killed to have this, not literally, but I would have loved to have had this functionality in any one of the many crises I've been involved in, which is, from small reputational dust ups to antitrust uh, litigation, IP theft, an 18-month FTC challenged $13 billion acquisition. Any one of these, if I'd had this tool, would have been measurably easier.
So, Mitch, when you're talking to potential customers and clients about this tool, what's the sales pitch or the USP for this tool then to make it something people are worth, spending a subscription fee every month for, or maybe a much larger cash, fee for larger organizations? What's in it?
Yeah, let me back up just a bit. So my basic thesis is that reputation risk is enterprise risk. It's just never been managed that way or priced that way, or every other level of risk, operational, legal, financial, compliance, has an infrastructure built to manage it. The reputation layer is intuition, emails, Word docs, teams of incredibly talented people doing a lot of work in a lot of different places, but there's no infrastructure, and everyone is essentially starting from zero again each time a new crisis occurs. There's the reactive method of hiring a firm, incredibly talented people to come in and see you through the crisis and get you to the other side. But that's reactive, and they're coming in and they're figuring out your business as they're helping you through the crisis. What I wanted to do was I wanted to create a readiness and response layer that could serve as that infrastructure. And that's what ClearLine is. On the front end, on the readiness side, it allows for an organization to run through various scenarios, and they're guided by questionnaires, right? Asking questions about the given scenario. And there are 137 scenarios in the library now across more than 15 different industries. And so they cover data breaches, they cover natural disaster, they cover vendor supply chain interruption, but also stuff like executive misconduct or labor disputes, or it's a robust library, and it continues to grow as we build out more scenarios. But the scenarios are there to walk the client through the questionnaires and then create a playbook, a crisis playbook based upon their answers to that questionnaire, as well as the company profile within ClearLine, which is rather robust and has close to 40 different fields that provide insight and input into the artifacts. So when it produces the playbook, it's producing it from the facts it knows about the company, about the industry it's in, about its executive team, about the areas of the country or the globe in which it operates, so on and so forth. There's another piece, and what it does is it produces a playbook which is fully editable and intended to be. It's a work product that is meant to then be taken by the professionals, fine-tuned, and then sent out. Always a human in the loop with ClearLine. But there is also then a spokesperson training component, which allows you to train your spokesperson. And what it is, it's an audio-based interview, mini media training, where the reporter, such as it is, keeps asking increasingly aggressive questions to test. Those are graded, and pointers are given, and then it can be done again to bring a spokesperson up. So that's readiness.
Okay, that's readiness. Let me pause you right there. We'll circle back, but I'm so curious about the spokesperson training. piece of that because essentially what you're building here now is the opportunity for individuals to go in and practice their responses to a media interview, right? So the tool will ask questions and I would give my answers. Is that all written or is that verbal?
It's verbal. It's
Okay,
verbal. You could do it written, but I think it takes the pressure testing out of it.
absolutely.
When you do it verbally, and here's the great thing too, it's not only aligned to those uh, crises scenarios that have been worked through, but you can run an interview prep on anything. So if there's a board briefing or a regular media interview coming up, you can use the system to train and fine tune the spokesperson for whatever the engagement may be. But yes, it's audio and it goes back and forth, and it hears the responses, it grades based upon whether key messages have been conveyed, whether there were holes in the answer that left room
Right.
for another question, and it tries
Okay.
to create better spokespeople.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay. Well, I don't like that very much because I do a lot of
I'm
media
sorry.
training and I don't really want AI taking that job. But, even you think about internal communications, if you're going to go do a town hall meeting somewhere and there's going to be employee Q&A, again, another opportunity. Now, this tool isn't built specifically for that, but it wouldn't be a stretch to incorporate some kind of an internal communications aspect to it as well. So that's all very cool. All right,
Thank you.
Mitch, you said you were talking readiness when I kind of interrupted you there with the spokesperson's training. Then where else do you go?
Well, next step is response, right? If and when a crisis event happens, and they can be crises of any size, existential or minor reputational dust-ups. But when they come, you declare a crisis, and if there is an existing training scenario playbook, it is loaded in, and the system updates that with facts on the ground, and then provides immediate actions that should be taken, provides a draft of the holding statement, and provides the stakeholder uh, notification sequencing, which is where something that I'm pretty proud of comes into play. The architecture of ClearLine allows for regulatory requirements to be plugged in as content, right? So for example, when there's a data breach, there are 54 different jurisdictional reporting requirements depending upon where the company does business. ClearLine knows from that profile where the company does business. They know from that profile what industry they're in, and they know from the regulatory library that plugs in at the top which regulations apply. And so when an active crisis is declared, one of the key components is the stakeholder sequencing. And it follows, part of our philosophy is always internal before external, and legal holds aside. But it 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 goes through the stakeholder sequencing, including those regulators, and it lists out which regulator, what statute, and what's the deadline, and then it starts ticking down. And as you get closer, it starts, it changes color, and then it becomes red. And so the system is used. It becomes sort of a system of record for all of those various communications components that go out, and that includes the internal communications from the CEO to the employees, as well as the holding statement that's readied, and any of the regulatory notifications that go out, client communications, so on. And so that's during response. And every time anything is crafted, edited, or changed in any way, or veers from what has been pushed down as the standard that it must adhere to, any change is recorded, time and date stamped, and becomes part of the official record of the communications response. So later, when a regulator comes in or an investigator comes in, or even just trying to an internal audit to do best practices, rather than going through Tom's email and Mitch's email and the G drive and how many things, and who was it that approved, the and rather than trying to piece all of that together, you just go to ClearLine, and the lifecycle strip just has it all there, ready to be exported for the auditor.
Right. Okay. So, wow, you've got a complete record of your response communications here, essentially. Um, uh, okay. So that's incredibly complex tool then. You're building in all the regulatory notification requirements, as well as doing spokespersons training, tracking all of this. I'm sitting here, Mitch, wondering, well, who's leading this from the company side? Is it the communications team? Is it the crisis management team? When you're talking to companies, where would this live in the corporate world?
The titles change, the departments change, but who owns this is who owns risk, generally. Whoever owns, and to be more specific, whoever owns reputational risk. Like we said, most comms teams are built for increasing visibility and awareness. Risk is part of the calculus, but it's not their job. I would see the users, and the thing about ClearLine is that it's fully team enabled. So there are 5 seats for any organization that signs up, has 5 seats, and you can add. So you can bring in your entire internal team. You can have somebody from legal on there. You can have somebody from compliance. Obviously, your comms person, if you have one. But the buyer is whoever that chief risk officer is, or whoever owns risk. The user is across the organization, but I would see comms being the folks who would benefit most from it, especially given the fact that you have that interview training based upon any interview you want. You can generate executive briefings based upon a contact in the built-in CRM.
So it's going to live with whoever's managing reputation risks. And, training and learning a new tool is always a challenge for an organization, right? And
Yes.
gosh, I went through this so many times working for a very large oil company, trying to get people trained up on a tool and then trying to keep that training refreshed over time. People change, different jobs, new people coming in. So what does the sort of onboarding process look like? Is that fairly simple, or is that, as I call, an opportunity for personal growth over time?
It is fairly simple, although when you get into that parent-child multi-organizational structure of ClearLine, it becomes more complex. 2 things are at work there. The onboarding process itself is interview-based. So it's asking you questions, and it's pointing out why the answers matter, right? So it's asking questions, things to think about, and why it matters. So it's a very self-serve kind of process. There's also an organizational memory layer. Now, it's not using data to train itself, but it does learn more about the organization. So when over time, the system that you're using in month 12 is demonstrably more attuned to your organization than the one that you rolled out in month 1. But the one that you rolled out in month 1 has walked you through this very simple onboarding process, as well as the scenario questionnaires. There are 2 main groups that we're focusing on here. And one are larger enterprises, insurance carriers, private equity firms, law firms, and holding companies, even agencies that with larger clientele. But then there's the group that the original product was first built for, and that is the small to mid-sized business in America. And there are somewhere north of 150,000 of those that are large enough to know that they have reputational risk exposure, but not large enough to afford the $25,000 a month crisis retainer to be in a state of preparedness, and could barely afford it, even though it's an existential cost that you must pay at the time of crisis, right? So what do? They improvise. They don't do anything. They just, and I don't know what the actual stat is, because I've learned that there's some doubt to it, but there is a very large share of companies that suffer a breach that don't make it out the other side. And it's a lack of preparation and a lack of a coordinated and sophisticated response that puts them in that position. What I was trying to do was create a tool that could democratize the access to crisis communications, for as wide a group as possible. And that group still exists. So we're selling to the large enterprises, and those implementations probably a couple of weeks. But we're also selling to that vast, sea of small to mid-sized businesses that could benefit from this, and who signing up is as easy as swiping a credit card, and onboarding is as easy as going through an interview.
And so you've got multi-tiered pricing for that. It's a subscription model for the small, medium-sized businesses, right? It's a monthly fee of, I think I saw on your website, $299 a month kind of thing.
That's for the readiness function. For readiness and response, it's a bit more.
Okay.
But it's still meant to be something that a business line manager could justify, or that a small business owner could absorb without having to, fire someone.
Right. Well, yeah, to your point, relative to what you'd pay a PR agency or a crisis agency to come in and support you, or just to even be on retainer, a fee at this level is pretty affordable, especially when you think about the preparedness that it brings, and helping your organization prepare for multi scenarios, and laying out so many different options for you to respond. So yeah, very interesting. Well, congratulations on pulling this whole enterprise together, Mitch. It sounds like it's been a lot of work for you. I do have one question for you around confidentiality, though.
Of course, yeah.
Because every tool built on AI, that little thought lingers in the back of your head, is like, how much personal information can we share with this and still feel confident that it's not exposing us to some other nefarious thing going on out there in the ether world. So how do you reassure people about the confidentiality of their company information using a tool like this?
Well, I personally and have always operated from a stance of maximum security paranoia, right? Always. That's me personally. Everything I've done in my own consultancy, and in my personal life as well. And ClearLine follows that same philosophy. There is absolutely no client data that is used to train any AI model. Okay, so that's first of all. The only any transfer of information or prompting is ephemeral. The question or the information that is fed via API that goes through the doctrinal and the language layers to make it, to prevent hallucinations and to institute the proper guardrails. None of that is going to, we use Anthropic. None of that is going to Anthropic for training purposes. It's all ephemeral. It's all encrypted at rest, as well as anytime it's in transit. And the build of the platform itself is such that each tenant's security is sacrosanct. And that's the only place where work product is stored. So the security, maintaining the work product and keeping it for eyes only of the organization is always top of mind. And nothing is used for training. Even the organizational memory, as I mentioned, isn't a matter of using it for training. It's just having a larger database of information to pull from when it's generating in that ephemeral state.
All right, so a strong reassurance there around the confidentiality of data using the AI tool. All right, well, that's always good to hear. We're always going to ask that question because, you know, it's on everybody's mind.
And to be quite honest, I don't trust. I wouldn't trust an AI without that proper guardrails. Or you have to verify, trust but verify. Someone said, and that's what you need to do.
All right. Well, Mitch, thanks so much for coming on to the podcast, and congratulations for, kickstarting this new company and, taking advantage of the latest technology to help small, medium companies as well as the big boys to help be better prepared to deal with crisis. So thank you, Mitch, for being on with us.
Well, thank you, Tom, for having me. It was a pleasure, and I really appreciate it.
All right, so if you're looking to learn more about this crisis tool, you can reach out to them at clearlinecrisis.com, and you will find Mitch there on that website somewhere. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Leading in a Crisis podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. Hey, if you want to drop me a line, you can drop an email to tom@leadinginacrisis.com, and we look forward to hearing from you. We'll see you again soon for another episode. Take care.